AudiobookHubs that provoke. This book is trying to air some of my views, perhaps uncommon and controversial, about a few issues that we constantly grapple with. All my observations may not be fully and unquestionably right, nor will they be a farce, and completely devoid of merit. Written by Roy T. James. Part 1. Chapter 1 Male, Female, and Libido, an Oblique View. I shall begin with a short introduction to the state of the art, as far as sex and the genders go. A man's sex drive is mainly in his head. Two areas of the brain, the cerebral cortex and limbic system, are vital to a man's sex drive and performance. They're so important. The fact is that as far as man is concerned, simply thinking or dreaming about a sexual experience is enough to impair him for a blissful completion. Researchers are finding new evidence of arousal of men caused by imagery and related stimuli, whereas such objects make only marginal changes in women's sexual attitude. Also, many of the statistics and reports show that men tend to have the higher libido. I believe that part of the problem with a lot of the studies, like Johnson & Johnson, is in the social stigmas that have been existing in the past centuries. Even though women nowadays feel more liberated and find it more appropriate to express their sexual desires/drives, not much has changed in this regard. The old double standard stands in a lot of instances, as though possessing some safety cover. For example, one of the most barbaric of all anti-female rituals, FGM, is freely practiced in many parts of the world. I happened to read a supporting letter or article written by a woman, stating how liberating FGM was for her and how comfortable it made her feel. From our medical knowledge, we identify this difference in libido with women's hormonal balances. Women tend to have extreme highs and lows in estrogen, progesterone, FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone, because of menstruation, whereas men's testosterone, estradiol, SHBG, sex hormone-binding globulin, PSA, prostate-specific antigen, etc., tend to remain fairly constant across the board until midlife. Hence, men also actually have a cycle similar to the women's monthly cycle, though not as extreme, and they also go through andropause, the equivalent of menopause. However, this takes the form of a lifetime cycle. Functionally, it is generally accepted that libido in both sexes is equally strong. Men tend to show off this sexual aggressiveness, while women tend to keep a more tongue-in-cheek libido. Women may be more conservative and pickier. It is thus accepted that most women talk about relationships, while most men talk about sex in general. But there are women who would appear this way as well. Overly aggressive. On the whole, it is normal for men to be more aggressive. Women will be, but only selectively. And that is why sex drive is more evident in men. I think we are way off the mark. From what can be learned by observing other forms of life, described in my book, The Unsure Male. Not only that, there is no aspect of life and living where females show a capability less than that of males, but also there are instances after instances where the females show a discernible upper hand when compared with male. If that's so, how come in the matters concerning sex, human males are being widely identified with a more aggressive and imposing role, a remarkable deviation from other forms of life? In search of an answer, I started observing the male lifestyle closely, especially those aspects that are unique for males. The answer I found happens to be quite an intuitive one too. Our bodies are so constituted as to put the benefits of multitasking to full use. We use each and every part of our physique for more than one function. For example, the same organ is used for speaking and for tasting, and so for smiling and for biting, or so for looking and for crying. As an unintended consequence of this, so far as man is concerned, whenever he does relieve himself, especially when the male anatomy requires him to be in physical contact with the necessary implement throughout the act, the possibility of him being strongly reminded of the other task of this implement exists. This repeats many a time in a day, that too in an ambience of comparative seclusion and privacy. The stage is set for arousing images to appear with exciting thoughts. As there is no evidence to suggest that the male sex is gifted with the additional willpower to counter this, a rather violent and excited disposition could be the result. Those inclined to meaningful vocations of life, like arts, crafts, science, or philosophy, generally vent this as increased productivity. This we reward as long as it is on matters other than sex, while reproing heavily if it happens to be connected with sex, and others, especially those on the fringes of camaraderie, vent this in ill-treating women. This, I think, is how aggression came to be associated with men in general. Here you may be wondering why men resorted to crimes against women. They could have easily found something less harmful and more likable to do with women, to act on the images that came up during such occasions as the ones narrated above. However, that doesn't happen. That is because the male sex is severely limited in its ability to do good to the females. Many such occasions in the past, during evolution, ended up in the male getting severely admonished whenever he attempted to do something good for the female. A casual glance at the fate of the male of the species whenever a mating session completes can show that the male, even now, continues to get reprimanded. Imagine how a constant image of wailing males will act on the male psyche. Therefore, being intelligent, man always resorts to one of the few things he is sure of, the easiest being such types of violence. This in fact is the main finding of my book. Naturally, as a reaction at least, when women would have come to giving a fitting reply, they also would have turned aggressive. It did happen or not, we don't know, as there is no evidence to suggest that in the earlier times women weren't forceful in finding their way. We can say the passive nature of women is a later development. I think women have resigned to a rather submissive role now, because of two reasons. 1. As women became experienced in these matters, it became clear to them that all that can be expected from men is nothing more than mere passive, sometimes good, presence. 2. Men found it really gratifying to extend assistance to women on all and sundry issues and started volunteering for anything and everything, at the flimsiest of reason. These days women happen to be found everywhere with a subdued libido and a bashful temperament, as that will encourage the man to volunteer for anything the woman would find inconvenient to do herself. The end result is that men proudly dumped on themselves all the tough, uninteresting and dangerous activities of living, and the women chose to stick to the rather less taxing and emotionally rewarding functions of life, tending to home and family. Over the ages, the physique of men and women came to be of different capacity, as all the while, both were exposed to differential loading. The origins of the hottest issue between the sexes, the suppression of the female sex, can be seen here. In the beginning, both men and women would have been of comparable strength, the women, perhaps having a more ferocious temperament like the female of all other species. To escape from his fear of free time, men constantly volunteered for all activities of life, and as a result, women would have enjoyed the light, relaxed routine. Over the ages men thus acquired a stronger physique, leading to the present disparity. As a permanent solution to our problems, in the case of man, I think it is worth examining the possibility of separating the sexual and the urinary functions from the very same organ meant for both. And in this, genetic engineering could turn out to be of good use. Perhaps the welcome changes brought by such an alteration could free the mankind of immense misery. One such being the possibility that the disparity between genders, specifically on matters of sexual desire and its manifestation, will get automatically corrected in a few years. And in a few, many, generations the woman will turn out to be of equal in strength and stamina to the man, making gender-dependent attitudes involving suppression of one half of the human population a thing of the past. Chapter 2. Why do we live in closed societies? The very idea of a society should be against human nature. Each member of the human species is vastly different from every other member of his species, having distinct physical and mental makeup with one's own priorities and approach. What is good for one need not be acceptable to every other person, and this, in fact, is what we celebrate as uniqueness or individuality. Therefore, it stands to reason to conclude that the human race will be best served when each and every member of the species grows unhindered in one's individual space or environment. But what is actually happening is something else. Apart from groups based on age, language, nativity, profession and other naturally identifiable differences, abstract walls like religion caste or social status and many other artificial differences are constantly rising in our midst, making it impossible to live without being part of a group. Unlike animals who took the natural path of cohabiting in groups as their survival is better ensured when they are organized thus, our species took the unnatural path of organizing themselves into groups. In fact, it is better to consider this as a good assumption. Remember, no one has established the survival rate of animals is considerably low or different when not in groups. We saw them moving in groups. We also saw them fighting against threats, and we put two and two together. We also overlook the fact that humans can survive better when not in groups. For example, widely dispersing at the sign of danger is a part of the survival strategy of well-trained forces. This can become much clearer if we are to examine the successes and failures of human society since the beginning of history. Those that are most often quoted as success stories are the tales of individual brilliance, like those extolling the capabilities of our effort in subjugating the planet and controlling its forces. In stark contrast, almost all the failure stories pertain to natural calamities or human intolerance. It should be clear as daylight. In any such disaster, the loss would have been much less and easily containable, had not the victims been living as a settlement, well connected to each other and with close interactions. If we are to scrutinize in earnest the advances we made and the pitfalls encountered, it is possible to label almost all instances of success as attributable to individual excellence, be it associated with arts, crafts, science, philosophy, exploration, cure, or anything else. Take the case of the Age of Exploration, one of the most successful periods in human history, where almost all the talents that we are proud of came to fore. The distinct mark left by some of our predecessors, whose spirit of adventure and the desire to face challenges being the singular reason behind such endeavours, is clearly noticeable in the way we identify many countries, places, or other entities. In the modern era, there is no invention, discovery, physical things of existence, or abstract ideas, which cannot be attributed to some fertile mind. Disregarding all this, we chose to constrict ourselves into society. Why? A closer look at the life and living style of animals can show that the only activity in life where animals take part as individuals is mating. All other chores, be it related to food gathering, or to rest, or of recreation, is always performed as a group. If so, why is mating restricted to the individual sphere of animals? Why don't they perform this in groups? What is there to prevent animals from partnering with the intention to mate when they are in groups? To find an answer to this, let us re-examine mating closely, breaking down the process into stages: before, after, and during the conduct of union. The period before, made noticeable by the plethora of natural enhancements to the female's appearance and form, presumably is to attract the male. The union proper, or the exchange of gametes, also is easily noticeable by the short time interval between the end and its beginning. But it is the post-mating behaviour that deserves further study, as, for animals belonging to whatever species, this phase is made striking by the total transformation of the female into an epitome of distaste. A few examples shall be: the males of the honeybee are led to their death. Their genitals drop off inside the queen. The male of the spider, black widow, usually dies days after mating, although occasionally he is so weak after mating that he is captured and eaten by the female. Among the insect, praying mantis, females devour their partners after mating. Female of the cat will scream and then move away immediately on completion of mating, fall down, lick herself furiously, roll around, and if Tom doesn't leave the scene promptly or tries to approach her right after mating, she will strike out at him. The not-so-friendly demeanour among the female of her canine friends as soon as the male dog completes its mission. The female of the lion may mate approximately every 15 minutes when she is in heat, continued for 3 days and nights without sleeping, and sometimes with 5 different males. The males are left physically exhausted as the act is often accompanied by snarling, biting, growling, threats and other forms of violence. Sometimes the female turns and swats the male during the dismount. Female of one of the most gentle and docile of all animals, deer, show tendencies of violence only on exceptional occasions, the post-union and rest being one such occasion. One thing can be read from this beyond doubt. Animals cannot afford to mate when they are in groups, as the resulting commotion, the post-mating fury of a large number of females, will not be suitable for a happy existence. Also, while in groups there are many other activities of mutual involvement that are far more acceptable, to males especially. It is therefore natural that animals choose to form into groups. I think we blindly followed animals. Having decided to perform the crucial activities of mating in private, we needed to find a reason for doing it so. As human nature posits, we would have found a reason for doing so, in a good abstraction, shyness. Covering ourselves with clothes, which gave rise to a plethora of pastimes like vanity or timidity, and many other signatures of the human race could find its origin here. I think we can't withstand the weather now since our bodies have become used to clothes, is a better argument than that we started to cover ourselves for escaping from the weather. In fact, for finding a reason to continue life as a society, we are attributing whatever good that happens with us to our social life. Also, whatever untoward happens with us, we always want to attribute that to someone from a race, whereas facts are exactly the opposite. Chapter 3 Religion. How a New One Evolve. Religions, a raison d'etre. No other example of mankind's quest for the irrational shall be more descriptive than our journey in theology. The earliest civilizations chose as gods everyday objects or beings or other entities occurring naturally. These objects of veneration would not have been successful enough in holding our attention for a considerable period of time in the defense against destabilizing thoughts, the primary function of any such entity. That the destabilizing thoughts is an integral part of life, and all that we see as unique to humans is easily understandable, once we pay attention to it, is discussed in one of my books, The Unsure Male. This could have been the reason for successive cultures to choose as revered objects and gods anything that is grand, esoteric and of magnificent proportions. Two things must have happened at this stage. Firstly, with the elapse of time, people would have acquired the necessary skills and the ability to make all these images and other representations at a faster rate, resulting in a larger amount of free time. Secondly, the objects itself, by constant use, would have become part of the daily use implements, the resulting proliferation giving away the novelty value, the essential function of making sure that no time is left for the destabilizing thoughts being compromised. Thus, and the improvisations having lost their bite to spark fresh, unique thoughts, people would have been on the lookout for something more potent. Thus begins the era of spiritual exploration, giving rise to many new religions. Each new religion is nothing but an amalgam of tenets founded on a varied mix of the harsh ones amongst the existing social norms and a few, even harsher ones, newly thought of. Needless to say, the more abstract the tenets, the more long-lasting the effects, the more constricting the rites, the more substantial the crowds. Thus, religion is but an excuse to bypass the rational while immersing oneself in constrictions and impediments. On top of that, religion offers a large structure, a medium in which such restrictions can manifest, and we are able to introduce new constrictions and impediments at will and with ease, that too with no fear of resolution. In fact, every new religion holds sway over the society for a certain period of time till the followers start yearning for something more stringent. This can happen, as, due to frequent use, the existing religious controls might become largely ineffective in keeping the destabilizing thoughts at bay. As one can easily see, the effectiveness of those stringent controls continues to get blunted by familiarity. This will render it perilous to defend against the destabilizing thoughts, creating a void, to be filled by either a different sect of the present religion following more severe controls or a new religion itself. As all religions are based on controlling the three most potent social retarders that human beings have identified as effective in regulating the severity and order of social transactions, new sects or religions take shape with differing degrees of harshness in the control and regulation of those very retardants. The first such force is easily identifiable as fear, the most potent of which, the fear of the unknown, thus occupied the position of retarder number 1. Modulating this dread is the primary service that all religions render to us, right from the time of birth. All religions, thus, exploit this fear to direct humans to organize their lives in a manner suitable for keeping one's interest away from those thoughts. The more effective was religion in shooing away fear, the more free time people must have had to be troubled again by such thoughts. That would have necessitated suitable entities of varied other forms to garner people's interest. Thus was born the second such force. The plethora of observances and other repetitive activities that are always associated with a religion constitute this. Each one of these having the potency of occupying a certain amount of free time, a large collection of such observances might have been necessitated for incessant support. Over time, these have come to occupy an important position in one's social life as rituals, ceremonies and other formalities as part of what we call the rich cultural heritage. The third and the most significant force is the part played by religion in providing one with hope, giving everyone a reason to do things as they are accustomed to by tradition. As mentioned, a new religion always evolves to fill the vacuum created by the existing one becoming ineffective. Naturally, new dispensations need to be based on images different from the earlier one. This could be observed in our religions of the past, each brimming with a multitude of divinities, images and ceremonies. Also, the severity and reach of the new one and its elements are always dependent on how the above steps were embodied in the defunct religion. But the latest religions are all based more on abstract ideas, the severity of which can be varied at will. Also, these abstract notions provide opportunities for frequent conceptual changes, limited only by human imagination. That could be the reason no new religion has evolved in the last few millennia. Chapter 4: What makes us do what we do? How is it that, while one person is ready to sacrifice his own life for a stranger, another show no qualms about murdering a dear one? What makes us do what we do? A survey of available literature points to 6 fundamental needs that everyone has in common, and all behavior can be simply abstracted as an attempt to meet those 6 needs. The needs can be identified as certainty, the assurance that one can avoid pain and gain pleasure; uncertainty/variety, the need one perpetually has for the unknown, change, or new stimuli; significance, the necessity to feel unique, important, special or needed; connection/love, the pleasure of strong feelings of closeness or union with someone or something; growth, the happiness from the expansion of capacity, capability or understanding; and finally, contribution, the fulfillment one feels from service, helping, giving and supporting. Fulfillment can only be achieved by focusing on 2 spiritual needs, all sagacious words and writings exhort. 1 such as the need to continuously grow, and 2, the need to contribute beyond ourselves in a meaningful way. Like any other living being, humans also have a long list of natural needs, and meeting these satisfyingly is the primary function of life. Therefore we humans have the need to be part of a lot of activities of varying style, content, endurance and strength, each of them meeting a part of one's needs and desires. But the above discussion does not answer the most pertinent question in this regard. Why is that, unlike other forms of life, we humans go after one or a few among their wants at the cost of sacrificing many other needs and conveniences, some of which, even to their peril? What are we striving for? What makes us do how we do? We, I think, have been maintaining this as one of the most difficult questions of life. There is no historical figure who did not attempt to answer this. A quick glance into our collection of classics of yesteryears and those of recent times shall easily show. Also, there is no one who did not become a historical entity despite pontificating on this question. A further look at the collection can reveal. It seems this is a question of very serious proportions. The answer to this question is easily obtained as far as a small baby or child is concerned. Whatever the child does, it shall be to please some of its wants, food or physical comfort, or to be free from discomfort, as can be observed easily. It is only when the child grows up to be a man or a woman does this answer would seem inadequate. Assuming that we continue to grow as rational beings and act in a manner appropriate for maximizing our level of contentment, we should be at a loss to explain many of the things that grown-ups do, things capable of causing great harm to their own life. As grown-ups, we display a leaning towards potentially dangerous activities as well as taking even ordinary and enjoyable things to its extremes. a closer examination of our actions points to the need of revisiting our idea of the rational. Also, its transient nature becomes another feature worth considering. Taking these into account, when we investigate our doings further, something interesting emerges that can explain much of our behavioral quirks we have been leaving as humor. Especially in the physical world, it is a known fact that everything loses the values attributed to any of its properties when the property is measured at its extremes. All their relationships, dependencies, and other connections are valid or can be reliably predicted, only when they are in a range noticeably away from the respective limits, both the upper limit and the lower one. An analogous relationship can be observed in living beings too if we are to study the occurrences of emotional expressions, rational transactions, or other forms of exchange. Our reactions when we are extremely tired, terribly unhappy, highly excited, or full of joy need not be the same as what our reactions would have been in normal times. As it is a known fact that manifestation of various elements of human nature under duress is prone to large deviations, the propensity to find solace in the extremes of whatever one does can also be considered as one such large deviation. Therefore, human interest for the extremes or the irrational can be attributed to some duress one is perpetually under. The indifference to murder, which is easily acknowledged as one such behavior, as well as the eagerness to sacrifice, which is rarely recognized as one, exemplifies such extremes. In short, all that we do can be better understood if we are to see them either as rational acts or as irrational ones. It should be clear, everything we do in a rational manner is to satisfy some facet of human nature. But a more interesting question in this regard arises. Why do we do irrational things? In fact, unlike other members of the living world, humans have the ability to ascribe emotions to events and occurrences of one's life. They also possess the wherewithal to indulge in an unlimited number of activities to suit each and every one of the emotions desired. And unlike all other forms of life, humans have been utilizing all these emotions to derive happiness. And he found it convenient to extend these in an irrational manner, extremes, whenever the need arose, keep the thoughts of such duress at bay. Irrational acts are thus of great help in making one forget the duress. One cannot extend the rational acts indefinitely in this manner. By definition, rational has a logical end, and the duress might return. Thus everything we do in an irrational manner is to free us of unhappy thoughts, by keeping us occupied without a break. Chapter 5 Unity is Strength. Like hell. Since time immemorial we have been spreading the idea that unity is something to strive for. Posters and pictures such as the ones shown play a major part in popularizing this. I think, to a large extent as a result of such influences, unity is strength has come to be accepted as a maxim, one that permeates into all activities of the society, especially in left-leaning states. Quite palpable is the presence of this in organized events of resistance against real or perceived dangers, which, though detrimental to harmony and peace of the society and many a time horribly destructive in nature, is tolerated by the general populace as good examples of the great power of unity. Whether this tolerance is worthwhile and, is this resistance yielding something, are questions that need to be examined afresh. If we compare the state of any society before this organized resistance and after a certain time gap, we might find the present state better off. But that doesn't show that the society is not worse off compared to what could have been the present state of the society had that resistance not taken place. Still, we consider organized resistance movements as a good thing. Isn't this another example of our penchant for the irrational? The idea that unity is strength, I think, originated when some of our ancestors saw around them instances like, say, a big animal like lion getting caught in a spider web, or a huge carcass easily moved by a colony of ants, leading them to the idea that when the insignificant things happen in unison, they can change something big. Notably, in the instances that struck them, the result of unification was visibly empowered in nature. And we have come to accept it as an adage, equally applicable to all living beings. Let us re-examine this aphorism starting with a rather simpler form of life, a plant. Imagine we sow a group of seeds. On germination, if they are planted suitably dispersed with the plentiful availability of essential needs like sunlight, water or other nutrients, the seeds are sure to grow into healthy plant sorties that provide a good yield. If not, the lack of the basic needs shall cause the plant's growth to be stunted and shall give rise to unhealthy trees, greatly affecting the yield. Such is the case with everything that has life. In the case of plants, the influence of factors other than the generally identified needs of sunlight, air, water, and nutrients has already been noticed as significant for healthy growth, the Indian scientist Dr. Jagdish Chandra Bose being a pioneer in this field. Also, even before the advent of any such scientific findings or discovery, all the essential parts of farming used to be governed by certain traditional observances, fables and other sayings that more or less is a hidden treasury of logical thoughts and concepts. In short, our approach to plant life is one of rational thinking, where we constantly monitor our performance and are always on the lookout for improvements. Quite rational also is our approach to the question of breeding and caring for farm animals, the size of such farms, its location, physical composition as well as the techniques employed in raising stock is guided by similar principles. Sufficient importance can be seen to be ascribed to the provision of adequate free area or space for each animal to grow unhindered, in addition to plentiful sunlight, fresh air and other natural amenities taking a prime position. But when it comes to human life, we certainly are deviating from such examples of good logic. Not only that the methods adopted to nurse human babies deviate from the sound techniques of our farms, but also the human parents are showing a clear affinity towards techniques and patterns that are restrictive in nature, even when those are detrimental to happy growth. Forgetting all that we did for facilitating robust growth in other forms of life, we seem to be on an ardent search to find novel ways of augmenting human capability to offset the loss caused by a restrictive approach. And I think, from a large multitude of such reasoning, inferences and syllogisms floating around in our literary wealth, the maxim, unity is strength, came to be appropriated to support such a move, to make marginal improvements in our capability without the need to affect any actual improvement in human capacity. In short, unity generates an apparent feeling of being reinforced, without any real addition to one's strength. However, in places where the proverb, unity is strength, might be found matching, there are other proverbs like faith will move mountains, or practice makes perfect, which could have been fitting the idea much more aptly. Or why didn't we think of the benefits of individuality and make an effort to popularize that? Why did we continue to forget the prime position of direction or leadership in the achievement of success? Or why such posters like these are not in wide circulation? More than that, we still go on with unity is strength as a rational maxim, especially in human affairs. Aren't we continuing with the irrational? Chapter 6: What makes us like what we like? I am asking this question thinking that an answer to this will be of great help in my search for the answer to another question: why is fair or light complexion so much in demand? That it is highly sought after is quite evident from the proliferation of whitening creams and other such treatments in our society. In fact, all my efforts to find an answer made it more and more clear to me that we humans have no special affinity for any shade. Look at our possessions, those living or non-living objects that are close to us, and see the more or less equal distribution of these among all the colors. It can even be said that it is the different shades of black that more often than not turns out to be the choice. A casual look at our wares, pets, vehicles or dresses should be enough to support this. Why is it that when it comes to humans, that too only in the matters of complexion, we have leaning towards the lighter one, the fair? More than that, why are we steering away from the dark? That humans want to be fair complexion has come to be accepted as a gospel truth, is evident from the plethora of writings available around us, repeatedly reminding each one of the need to be fair towards the dark-skinned. Can this be true? Is it possible to have such a natural attraction towards fair or light tone in appearance, one that is strictly limited to the color of human skin? And in all other cases of living or non-living objects and their parts, the natural attraction gets distributed uniformly across colors. The origin and history of the word fair indicate that the meaning assumed by the word in the old writings was mainly for denoting and conveying ideas of attractiveness and intent, rather than any physical attributes. The word thus came to be associated with things that are desirable the most, one can easily gather. Therefore, it is easy to propose that fair complexion happened to become something worth longing for, as that was a complexion associated with everything good. Yes, the skin associated with fair became more attractive, as that was the skin of successful people, the luckier ones who lived a luxurious lifestyle, who did lead a fuller life and were visibly happier. That brings us to the most significant question in this regard: what makes people from the land associated with the fair skin so worthy of admiration, that too, of such proportions that the others are dying to copy even their appearance? In fact, more than its current nature or even its magnificent looks, what makes something worthy is the belief, the general idea about how it came into being, as Dr. Paul Bloom, Professor, Yale University, writes in his book, How Pleasure Works. During experiments, where children were told about things being created either on purpose, with someone working very hard to do them, or by accident, it could be observed that the very same object became more appealing and valuable even to a 3-year-old when it was told that it was created on purpose, than when the creation was mentioned as accidental. A history of good tidings associated with the source of pleasure can add to the sensations emerged or the satisfaction derived, towards augmenting the happy feelings. The vice versa also is true. A negative image can greatly alter the outcome, by leading even the well-intended, good entities to unhappiness. In short, the more attracted we are by the ambience around an entity, the more determined we are to possess that entity. That is the reason the history of fair-skinned land, especially since the Industrial Revolution, adds handsomely to whatever pleasure we derive out of things from that land, and fair complexion is one such thing. It is now very clear, we like what we like because we like the history that comes along, and the same is true for all that we dislike too. This history is the one we put to effective use in supporting a decision, whether it is to like or to dislike. That is the reason why we are always wary of our actions, especially of pleasing someone, for one can never be sure of the expected results taking place. Whereas when it comes to hurting someone, we rarely face the need to worry. The results take place as expected.